Let's talk about the cinematic.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
this is good.
The cinematic then.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, our, you know many of my thoughts from the video.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm just thinking back to our like messenger thread when this came out. You were fucking livid.
Yep. You know what my problem was? More than anything else, the execution of the cinematic wasn't really a problem. I thought that obviously, Heavensward comparisons aside, which I think are a bit interesting, I think that the Anduin bit was like, okay, that's very well done. You've done the emotional hook. Gonna overlook the logic of, well, to be fair, it's my fault for being overly logical instead of just rolling with rule of cool. It's like, fine, okay, Surfang, Shadowlands, what do you mean? Even here is where you're supposed to be here because you're dead anyway.
Soul Echoes on the sword, because that's the three wielders of Charlemagne.
Yeah.
But people got really confused because it's souls.
Yeah.
But also that's kind of Blizzard's fault for making the souls confusing because it's Shadowlands, so you would have thought that was their souls, but they weren't really blue, which makes us think they're maybe not the souls. But it's all confusing.
Yeah, because they opened the can of worms that is metaphysics in a fantasy game, and they can't handle that at all, so everyone doesn't go, oh cool. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people like, oh cool, I understand. And I do understand the point. It's just that to me, the entire cinematic, the Anduin bit less so. I definitely think I was thinking, this feels so unearned. This feels out of nowhere. Especially because, narrative-wise, I have no idea why the ciphers of the first one helped us break Anduin free like it was supposed to. That's not been clear. Maybe there's something in the raid fight, but I'd seen the cinematic before the raid fight, so because that's how they've done it, because they posted it on YouTube. So that's a bit awkward for me as a player, I think.
Don't really think there's much there.
Yeah, so it's like ultimately all of that, and he just broke free because we were fighting him. That doesn't really.
Well, I think you could maybe say it's like we weakened the thing, and ultimately he is mirroring what happens with Darian at Light's Hope Chapel.
Yeah,
you can maybe say the difference with Light's Hope Chapel is that it's the holy ground, but like fundamentally, it's like Darian's father and all that shit. That is like the reason why he's able to finally break free of the Lich King.
Yeah, it's like that's all kind of fine, but to me it was the specifically the Arthas bit later on where like, to me just. It felt like paying lip service to Warcraft's past when it, to me, opened a whole can of worms of what could Shadowlands have been if you had spent more time being about these characters as opposed to the cinematics being about these characters and the expansion being about the jeweler. I guess that's ultimately, because I don't want to harp on with this because I could for a long time because I was genuinely angry after watching it because I was thinking what it could have been, but...
Your folly
was
expecting a well-considered and delivered story from the current World of Warcraft development team.
That's
Matt is fucking stupid.
Yeah, that was my emotional reaction of just, what do you mean this is what you've done when you promise so much more? And I know you could probably do so much more if you had the resources. You're a multi-billion dollar company. Why is this your output? That was mostly my feeling. Obviously, you go, this makes sense given everything, but...
Take Alpha in that other game.
Yeah.
That other game that we both play.
Yeah.
It's another MMORPG.
Yep.
Don't mention the FF14! Like, Alpha gets more fucking character depth and, epilogue cutscene cinematic to explain him than Arthas does in this.
Yeah.
And it's just because, there's what they're able to do. But you can maybe say what Blizzard is interested in doing, what Blizzard is willing to actually commit spending to doing, is evidently not story. So, I would say that Blizzard institutionally doesn't give a fuck about these characters or this story. And that is proven by how they chronically underinvest in these things. Now, the individual people involved in all of this do care about this story and do care about these characters. But ultimately, that doesn't mean much. What actually means something is what people get. So, this whole thing where it's like they're trying to, tell a movie story by TikToks. Okay, this is longer than a TikTok or whatever, but, 2.5 minutes. Yeah. It's like, come on, 2.5 minutes, is that all you can give this? And like, don't go and tell me that your problem is that it's expensive to do the animation. Number one, you're fucking Blizzard. Number two, okay, solve that problem. Get around that problem.
Yeah.
Really? Giving Arthas a decent send-off is not enough to make you get around that problem? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing where like again, emotional reaction was you used the imagery of the Lich King and of the Helm to bring people into this expansion, and you give Sylvanas, who no one likes anymore. Well, not no one, obviously people still like her.
There's like 7 people on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're basically talking themselves raw to Sylvanas on the daily.
Yeah.
You're going to piss them off with that statement.
Yeah, for sure. So you give Sylvanas
all of them, they're scary.
Yeah, you give Sylvanas this little send-off bit where it's like, it's not about Arthas, it's about her and Arthas as a character in her story. And you're like, I don't care. You don't care about Arthas. You don't care about Kel'Thuzad. You don't care about Ner'zhul, as we went into in depth last week. So I don't care anymore. If you're not going to care, I'm just going to feel annoyed. And that's something I guess players have to deal with, that Blizzard don't care in the same way. So
yeah, no, ultimately the current, and I'm happy to say it, the people writing World of Warcraft right now don't give enough of a fuck about the foundations of this story. Yeah. They use it with Shadowlands. They systematically deconstructed and destroyed what people cared about from Warcraft 3. They underwrote all of their own new characters, including the likes of fucking Pelagos and all that undeserved bullshit.
Yeah,
I mean, could have been deserved, but you would have had to tell us the story properly in game. We see his arc. We barely see his arc. I mean, maybe we're going to get World of Warcraft Pelagos, the next in their series of repair job novels.
No, they'll do. Well, I mean, they haven't done one in a while, but they'll do like the 1,000-Year War. Just it's Pelagos as the arbiter for an hour of Pelagos' voice actor in a booth talking about little stuff. Because I mean, that's another thing where that just didn't. It could have made sense, but to look at the plot points and beats, story beats as delivered by World of Warcraft, the game, and Blizzard, the unit, as opposed to all the stuff we're filling in our own heads in hindsight, you're just like, yeah, there's no character development. The character development happens at the flip of a switch and doesn't match the actual ending either. So it's like Pelagos' character development from the Kyrian story doesn't line up with becoming Arbiter anyway.
Yeah, but I think Blizzard thinks they're giving us a story. Yeah. What they are giving us is a like YouTube AMV of the top highlights of the story.
Oh yeah, it is
right. Like they're not actually telling us the story. They barely do that. And I think that they have this massive disconnect in their heads between what they think their story is, because they know all the character motivations, they know all the logic behind it. But I think they really struggle in getting into the mind of, the mind of the viewer, the mind of the person actually playing the game and seeing how they experience the story. Mm-hmm. The sheer, the amount of times in some of our lore videos that people just say, oh, well, that's all made up. Yeah, and I'm just like, those are all quotes from the game. Those are inside that you do know. Oh, wow, they missed everything. And it's not their fault. Yeah. It's just Blizzard being awful at telling a story. I don't understand. I don't really understand. Oh, Awesome Too says the writers take criticism as bullying. I'm only criticizing them in professional capacity. Ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
if a sequel to a movie has a new writer and it's pretty badly written and their script hasn't been completely, mangled via production and editing and all of the things, because the final, rewrite of the script happens in the editing booth for the movie. Yeah. But, all those factors aside, it's like, well, look, if we can't just not talk about the writing because somebody did it and it would be mean to point out that it's rubbish. Now, it's less... Okay, no, the writing is generally... Here's the thing, right? The writing is pretty rubbish and stilted. I'm fairly sure that a lot of the in-game dialogue is just not written by a writer, because when you see a lot of these characters speak when Christy Golden is writing them inside the novels, basically the voice of characters seems to change between the books and the game sometimes. Between quests and cinematics. Yeah. It seems like they're quite inconsistently written. And when you see a lot of them in-game, it comes off really, really just stiff. And I kind of get confused because I know that these voice actors go, they go in studio, right? They have a director actually directing them, And I sometimes just wonder, how do you get a performance like Bane's for the Shadowlands where it just means nothing? Yeah. It's so, stilted, right? It's cobbled together. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes from the fact that I'm fairly sure, I mean, I might be wrong on this, but I'm fairly sure I remember reading that, I know, and seeing like quest stuff, that the quest designers write the quests.
What?
And the writers don't write the quests.
What?
I'm fairly sure that's the case.
Taking the piss, man.
I'm not taking the piss. I'm fairly sure that's the case.
That would be like me writing the dialogue.
Yeah.
That'd be like me, right? I can't write dialogue. No, it's not my job. I'm not good at it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want that.
I may not be completely so. I mean, obviously, if anyone knows for
God.
sure, correct me. But I'm fairly sure quest designers do with the quest stuff on their own. They've like, I'm sure there's communication between, but it's not like over in FF14 where the content team write the quests.
How does FF14 have such a higher word count and like seemingly like far fewer writers?
I imagine it's because of, I mean, a good writer. And I don't mean an amazing. I mean a good writer, like an effective, experienced writer, can write a lot, like a whole ton, very fast. And I think production can bottleneck that. So I think the word count of FF14 in terms of time probably isn't really that high compared to like a novel writer or something in terms of just sitting down and going But you need the production capacity to go, well, we can completely free this writer up to just blast writing and then get that in all our content and then make sure to have time at the end to make sure everything like is congruent and works together. But there's so much of like the Zereth Mortis quest in particular. I think they're like very, because I said this last week, I think they're very well done. They're very nicely in their own little bucket. They're very well put together. And you can tell they're all working from like the same notes of what the Enlightened are and what Zereth Mortis is, and it feels like really congruent. It feels like it's a nice little world, but it doesn't feel in any way connected to any of the narrative. And then as soon as you get to any of the main campaign stuff, you're like, why is this completely different?
I guess it's less, okay, yeah, so it's like writing, they're very mixed on. They have like a mixed record on the quality of writing and the consistency of the portrayal of characters. But then I think narrative design, and this is the bit that confuses me, because they have more narrative designers, I've been told, than ever before on that team. And I don't understand how their narrative design is so fragmented. I mean, I just have to assume that they're all kind of high in their own supply and aren't actually engaging with what the user experience is.
I am massively assuming it's too many cooks.
Or maybe it's a too many cook situation. Yeah, it's really bizarre to think about when you just consider how like other games are able to do more with less, it seems.
Yeah.
And it's like their efforts are not evenly applied. Because like we're in a situation where their A plot is so weak and so underwritten and important characters like Jaina and Sylvanas and all of that. I mean, here's a great example actually. Do you remember, I think it was at the Batman and the Superman movie, Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice.
I've never watched that.
There's a bit, I watched the extended edition while building IKEA furniture, and it's one of the worst movie experiences I've ever had. The fight scene between the Batted Man and the Supered Man was pretty cool, though. But there's a bit in that people take the piss out of, where basically Bruce Wayne, it's like he just gets, it's like he just gets a little USB stick or an email that just has trailers for the other Justice League characters.
Yeah.
And that appeared in my head immediately whenever I logged into the game this week. Because, number one, that cinematic with Sylvanas, when she's lying at the table going through her, her coma, her basically Mr. Robot Season 2 arc, done in like a TikTok. She's going through that. Like, I kind of assumed, okay, well, I'll probably see how Sylvanas gets there. Because the last time my character saw Sylvanas, she was, well, just all the stuff in the last patch. And no, all that, and I'm going to say that this is just fucking lazy, and I don't care if there's a production reason behind it. It feels lazy, and that's what matters to a customer. So I logged in, and at this stage, I'm like, okay, this is the big chapter leading up to the raid. I wonder what's going to happen. I'm finally going to get to meet Sylvanas and all, and I'm just so disappointed when I walk over and I forget what this Bolvar, whatever character, it's just like, something important has happened. I need to tell you,
Uther,
and I click on it. Uther, yeah, and it just plays an MP4. And I'm just there like, what? You're telling me Sylvanas is like a pivotal character and you couldn't even be bothered to have her properly in your campaign? And so all that time where I'm going around killing random, baddies in Zereth Mortis in the bit of the campaign that leads up to the raid, I'm going around there just being like, why am I fighting these random devourers?
What's here?
when the bit with the characters that I'm supposed to care about, you delivered via a character just giving me a play YouTube video button.
Yeah, that's basically the funny part.
At that stage, I just almost felt offended that they were supposed to have me take their story seriously.
Yeah.
And they've done this a few times before, and I really don't like it. Well, I think what happens is they get really excited about making a cinematic for themselves, so they make a cinematic, but it's as if they don't do any narrative design to actually work out how does this fit into the viewer's experience.
Yeah, no, they've never earned a cinematic.
Yeah, exactly. So that whole Sylvanas cinematic, like, I mean, why the hell did we not get gameplay around that?
I mean, even if you want a comparison, there was, at least for like Jaina's Thros whole thing, that wasn't the most incredible gameplay, but we actually went there. We were physically there doing stuff.
Uther.
We didn't do that for Sylvanas.
Some of my favorite quests in Shadowlands are when we kind of relive Uther's past.
Yeah, why is
and he
that
sees all of his memories like blend in. So all of these scenes, like, I get it. They want to have, well, I guess good Patty and evil Patty talk to each other. Yeah. And everyone go, oh my God, chills. I am shook. Or, whatever way people tweet about cinematics these days. Yeah. God, I'm such a curmudgeon now. I've watched so much DS9, I'm just turning into Odo. Anyway. Like, why could we not, through some fucking Kyrian, timey-wimey bullshit, have some gameplay where maybe our character is there helping Sylvanas through this?
Yeah.
Or, maybe Jaina, basically, right, fuck it, it's Inception. We just have to go into her dream and help her out. Yeah. I don't know, but, like, why did they not try to, like, do some narrative design as people making a video game to make a video game narrative experience? In the same way that I think the strongest single quest in Shadowlands thus far is the one where you are just the guy in Red Ridge with a shotgun trying to defend your family and you get killed. Yeah. And it's just a really nice, simple little thing. But, like, why on earth were they not willing to do that for, like, their most important character this expansion?
I am assuming it's just they don't have the idea, or the narrative designers are so far removed from anyone that's greenlighting content in production that it's like, you maybe got the Uther thing because that was planned like 3 years ago, but all this other stuff wasn't maybe planned, and it's kind of not 3 years ago, but like 2 years ago now. Maybe it does sound like this is the way I kind of think of it. It's so illogical that it can't be a decision.
That's actually quite sensible.
It cannot be a decision they've made to do this way. It has to be the result of something else. It's kind of the way I was saying this to you earlier, where people always think, well, that was a terrible decision. It's like, very rarely do people make really dumb decisions. People are forced into doing dumb things because of circumstances, which is to say, it's like, well, that's clearly a terrible design. You're like, it likely wasn't designed.
That's it. So actually what happens is, Steve and Co., they're actually in a small bunker in the car park. Mm-hmm. And they get to send one email a day to gameplayfirst@blizzard.com.
Yeah.
And that's it. They're just not allowed.
That's what it seems
and
like,
if they send 2 emails to gameplayfirst@blizzard.com, like, the enforcers come in and slap them about the place. And that's why, like, WoW has felt so weird and kinky these days.
I mean,
I've worked it out.
Yeah, I mean,
100%.
That's the thing where you think about how they have more narrative designers than ever, and you're like, well, why do you need a bunch of narrative designers? Why do you not just need a handful and then get them to get a load of content boys to make the content? That's the awkward thing where it's like, is there just so much production oriented incompetence that they are, they're hamstringing themselves by just, having too many conversations about the narrative instead of going, what's cool? This is cool. Hello, making stuff people. Can you make the cool? Make the cool sweet.
Yeah, like, could they just remember they're making a game? Like, here's the thing, because it's all everything's built on top of, on top of each other. And I think, look, if they're all actually just in a fucking cope corner looking at the people on Twitter who basically, just go, shook, I am crying, yes, and all these fucking people on Twitter. If it's as if they just completely shut down and only listen to those people. But the thing that you need to realize is that this shit's just not working with people. But, like, this cinematic here, people seem to be so angry about Sylvanas in this cinematic, and I'm just thinking, Well, what if we had a really strong quest? Like, what if we had a really strong quest line with Sylvanas at the start of this Covenant chapter, instead of just killing a bunch of random mooks in Zereth Mortis in a way that has got like barely any fucking connection to the narrative?
Yeah.
Not, because the actual narrative, by the way, it's not the plot; it's the characters. Yeah. That's one of the secrets. It's the characters that matter and their arcs and the core of storytelling, etc. But, if they had have done that right, then maybe this cinematic would have actually really resonated with people so much more. And they wouldn't have been angry at Sylvanas' involvement because they would have, through gameplay and interaction and participation, actually understood where Sylvanas was coming from and understood where all these characters were coming from in the way that I think people actually generally do understand Uther because they actually got it via gameplay.
Yeah.
Like, they could have had this work, but they didn't make a game.
Yeah.
They made little machinimas they were excited about.
While the other people went and made Zereth Mortis, and you're like, if you think about this game from a narrative first perspective of, you're trying to build a game that's around the narrative of Sylvanas, Jaina, Anduin, Uther, let's leave Bane out because they have no idea what to do with him, and how they deal with, Anduin having the, it's the echoes of Arthas in Anduin through the Jailer's domination, even though it's not about how you chose, or, the difference between Anduin and Arthas, and how you could really interestingly kind of go through that, where you could even have characters debate, where it's obvious, someone goes, he's just like Arthas, and then someone goes, what the fuck do you mean he's just like Arthas? He didn't make a decision, Arthas made the decision at Stratholme, and then you have an interesting conversation there. You explore that through some form of interesting gameplay. Obviously, that would be difficult to do. But if that's the narrative, like, first perspective, then why does Zereth Mortis even exist? And you're like, well, from that perspective, there's no reason for Zereth Mortis to exist. There's no reason for Korthia to exist because they don't do anything to further that whatsoever. They're just, we need physical representations of where the plot's going.
Yeah.
And that's a problem where if instead of Zereth Mortis, you had a whole campaign that was, we're going to go and we're going to go into like different memories of Stratholme, see how that went down from different perspectives, or we're going to go and go into Sylvanas' past from this new Sylvanas' perspective, and she could like have commentary and stuff like that while we're helping her deal with the manifestations of that stuff in her head, or even just entirely abstract ways, the way they do with the mirrors, the way we did with Uther's memories. If you were to design the gameplay of this expansion, of this patch, from that perspective, you wouldn't have done this Zereth Mortis shit. You'd have just went, we're going to fight the Jailer in we're going to teleport from Torghast over to the Sepulchre. That's going to be how we do it. And we're just going to spend all this time examining what's happening here.
So here's a little bit of, I almost think this is telling a story in a linear video game for babies, like 101. And I say this almost intending it to be slightly offensive because, frankly, it's absurd that this is not done correctly. Mm-hmm. So why is the Wrathgate something that people liked? Well, it's because you went through the zone of Dragonblight. This threat was slowly growing. Mm-hmm. You then have all the stuff going on with the Lich. You are literally questing, and for the Alliance's case, you're questing with Bolvar, and you finally get to the big moment, and the cinematic happens. Yeah. The cinematic is putting a massive highlight on a really cool bit of story that you have been actively participating in with one of the characters who's the main dude in the cinematic. And right after that, you're rolling into political fallout and Undercity. So the cinematic works as a part of this entire game experience. And the next time to think about this is, funny enough, Warlords of Draenor, because people liked the level up experience of Warlords of Draenor.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, and it's like, why is that? Well, okay, let's just talk about the Alliance perspective. So I meet this character called Yrel, and sure, maybe she goes through arc like a little bit quick, but whatever. Yeah. The arc is there.
They did cut the middle out of it.
You can. Okay, in the patches, Yrel falls to shit, but I mean in just the level up experience.
Yeah, fair.
You're questing with Yrel, and you're questing, you meet Velen, and you go through all this stuff with all those characters. You have, the few different scenarios, the few different things, and then there's the whole Darkstar cinematic. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I've seen, because you just finished fighting Ner'zhul, and then the cinematic happens. And it's like, oh shit, great. This cinematic was a massive point of punctuation, and it was showing something really cool that I earned because I just defeated, that boss. It was just a part of this whole storyline that you were participating in.
Yeah.
And then time goes on, you make your way into Talador, and it's the exact same thing. You go through the story with all of these characters, and, instead of just Khadgar like appearing with an MP4 for us to watch, you go through a fight when the cinematic plays.
Here's a YouTube link, champion.
Like the cinematic plays, and your character may as well be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the Horde players as well, with what you call him? Oh man, Duratan's brother. You see the relationship between Duratan and his brother throughout all of that. And then there's the big confrontation at the pass.
Yeah, a thing happens.
And it's all following through the gameplay. That is so different to just Uther being like, champion, put this into your computer and view it. And it just feels
USB stick.
It just feels so bad when you just know you're clicking on this button to view a cinematic,
because
when
you know that because it's not represented in game.
Yeah.
It fades to black and cuts at everything, you know it.
Yeah. That was it. And I think they've really lost that because instead, how many cinematics have they basically played like this for us? It's a few at this stage in Shadowlands.
Yeah.
And it just shows how completely unable to do the story in game that they've been. And it's such a shame. And I think that so many of the criticisms that people have of this story and the lack of understanding, the lack of emotional resonance, it would mostly have been solved if they actually just told their plot.
Yeah. They just don't make the game and the story. They don't make those two at the same thing. They're not the same thing. They're putting the story and they're going, I guess, you know what it's like? It's almost like the worst case of what people think about. I know it's definitely not really true, but it's the way people think about like Destiny, where for so many people, the story of Destiny, especially when campaigns were pretty short-lived and raids were a bit sort of, we know why we're here, sort of, but whatever. And it's like all of the lores in the books, the codex, the in-game stuff, are like, well, all the lore's there. And these things are basically two separate products that sort of cross over a little bit sometimes, and that's how a lot of people experience it. And I think that's just kind of how they've ultimately ended up developing it. Whereas like this isn't World of Warcraft with the World of Warcraft story. This is World of Warcraft with the World of Warcraft narrative design team story that's supplanted on top of it, and sometimes they overlap. Sometimes, maybe that's what it feels like. And I can see how that comes around with the community's kind of direction they've aimed for since Legion, with gameplay and Raiders first and all that stuff.
I'm sick of excuses. And I get I get some of the defenses people have for the various things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, cool, that makes sense. But also, that's just in your head.
Yeah.
In the same way that all that stuff with Kalazad that we covered last week had that essential story point to Kalazad had to be told to us in an interview.
Yeah, actually. And another point that's kind of similar, the Devourers. Do you know why the Devourers started getting into Zenith Mortis and into the Shadowlands more?
Pray tell.
In one of the lower entries in Zenith Mortis, it's they're using Mossworn stuff, Mossworn magic and Moss Steel, I think, as a gateway in.
Yeah.
So the Devourers, the Unraveling isn't that unnecessary side effect of what Soval's doing in gathering power.
Fracture in the batter.
How many people know that? How many people care about that?
Yeah.
And they're building up the Devourers to be a thing soon.
Yeah, the Devourers are probably going to be like the next big threat.
Yeah.
And because they have done such a rubbish job of storytelling in Shadowlands, because I think the Devourer story could be pretty cool. I think the Devourers are really cool. And it makes me sad that this thing that is cool, basically nobody seems to have been able to follow it.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, ooh, boom, we've scattered our story to the wind. Good luck picking it up, dickheads.
And the one thing I'll say is that is completely fine as if you're going for environmental storytelling, if you're going for storytelling the way you did in vanilla, in the way that, From Software's Miyazaki does with all the Dark Souls stuff, because you could finish a Dark Souls game. Obviously, I'm talking this because I've been playing hours of Elden Ring. You could play hours of Elden Ring and not have a clue what's going on. You look for it, it's there. But that's not what they're trying to do with World of Warcraft. They're trying to actually tell you a story, and they're just failing by kind of trying to go for the best of both worlds at the same time. It's like, we'll have all of this little teases for the next expansion. You're like, why are you teasing an expansion and then deliver an expansion that doesn't actually do anything with any of those teases, because it's basically what you did with Shadowlands, more or less. Like,
yeah, it's just really bad. And, I even just think about the point where I'd done that part of the campaign, and I just got the go kill Zoval quest, and I'm just like, wait, I haven't met Sylvanas.
Yeah,
I haven't met what are you doing? And there's just things like, characters like, say, Jaina. I would have liked to see more Jaina Arthas stuff. Now, I get Arthas was a long time ago in her past, but also Blizzard, the first bit of trauma that Jaina sees in her personal torment in Thros at the start of Battle for Azeroth is Arthas.
Yeah.
And, some more would have been nice. And I'm saying this because, Jaina got some closure at 3.3. She then got sort of re-tormented with it all in BFA. It's like, well, I'd like to know what she has to say. And I'd like to actually see it be woven into the story instead of just being a stay a while and listen, because those are kind of lazy. Those stay a while and listens often, if core information is in a stay a while and listen, what that basically means is, sorry, we couldn't actually tell you this as a part of our story, so here's a scene.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but you're designing a game. So it's all very strange. It's all very underbaked. I think that this cinematic, actually had plenty of good ideas. Yep. Because ultimately, if I think about this thing with Arthas, that's Uther's fault. The whole way that there's no catharsis with Arthas, that's Uther's fault, because he chooses vengeance over, justice.
Yeah.
That's probably the kind of the meta commentary of this whole thing. I think it makes complete sense that way.
Yeah.
A little bit underbaked in the telling. Maybe some more lines from Uther. Maybe Uther in this cinematic perhaps passing comment on how this is all ultimately his fault. And, he is the reason that Arthas could not find justice, and that as a paladin, that is what Uther should seek. And it was great seeing Uther, actually understand that through the patch 9.1 arc. I would have loved to have seen the rubber really hitting the road.
Yeah. But
it didn't happen in the cinematic.
No, because they had 32 minutes ago. Here's whatever.
Yeah, so it's look, would FF14 be able to tell its story, to tell as good a story, if they had to make their cinematics like this? The answer is no.
No, not even close.
Yeah.
It would be equally as terrible, if not worse, because they try to go for so much. And they need to deliver so much dialogue to have everything go. Someone there in chat said, Matthew Newton said, imagine if the Katana Ravel cinematic information in Shadowbringers was stay a while and listen.
Oh.
Or even a lore book, you're like, no, well, the whole thing is this is all this. They went for this loads of stuff tied all together super, super well and with incredible emotional payoff. And if they tried to because Blizzard don't even have that lofty ambition. They just try to have some simple character narrative arcs, and they can't execute on it the way with their current execution plan and strategy. So F14 would be substantially worse.
Yeah,
under the same circumstances, for sure.
Instead, I'm left where all of this stuff is underwritten. There's not enough of it. I'm killing some randos in Zereth Mortis, and it feels like, as you said, the story they're trying to tell it's like there's a complete mismatch.
Yeah.
In the development team. I just don't understand it. I can understand maybe how it could happen, but it's just incredibly dysfunctional and disappointing. And ultimately, I think what has happened is they've got more narrative designers. That means more narrative is being designed.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It's so much more narrative is being designed than what they can actually execute on. So they're probably, in WoW, there's probably so much more detailed background lore, more than there ever has been. And, it goes into Grimoire and it goes into the books, it goes into all of that. But ultimately, because it has to be spread so thin in game, it feels like there's less story. It feels like the game is smaller. So, what you probably need is less narrative design, less narrative designers, and actually design a narrative that fits what Ian and John Haidt actually let you budget into the game.
Yeah,
they don't have the budget to tell the narrative they're designing.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
your job as a narrative designer is to fit the design into the actual, game, right? Like, if Thomas was doing narrative design for Pale Beyond that vastly exceeded our budget for the game, and then we had to, completely gut scenes and cut things down, so we end up with just this piece of shit with loads of holes in it, it'd be a terrible game. And sure, some lore YouTuber, like I don't know, me or Tally or all the people who do the cinematic analysis videos, we could sit down and explain the story of our game to people where everything logically makes sense. But it wouldn't make experiential sense, and that's what games are. They're an experience. It's insane.
Yeah, because a lot of what ends up being the case is the canon ultimately is that the community comes to a rough consensus on all of the connected, because you basically were playing connect the dots, but the dots are extremely far apart. And there's a couple of different paths to take, and then people in the community and content creators take generally an average. Here's roughly where we're thinking. People have different directions of connecting the dots, but roughly falls under the same. This is what we're guessing the team want to show, and then it's like, oh well, no, it's there. It's just, but that's the thing. It's not there. If it were there, fair enough, but it's a terrible experience to have to guess what they were thinking.
Yeah,
I mean, it's different if you've got take your own perspective on what's been shown, but if it's just not there, then you can't take a different perspective. It's just, no, you just need to tell the story. You don't buy a book to get the cliff notes.
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes down to one of the hardest things is saying no.
Yeah,
it really is. Actually, God, probably in a far more unfortunate way if you think about some of the stories that came out from Blizzard.
Yeah,
creepy man children. But one of the hardest things is saying no, because you have these incredible narrative ambitions and all these things you want to do, all the riches you want to put into the lore. But ultimately, you have to make the hard choice to kill your babies.
Yep.
There's so many aspects of the lore. Like, look, I like the Devourers. It looks like Ridley Scott fucked a Tyranid.
They shouldn't have been in Shadowlands.
But they shouldn't be there.
Yep.
There's plenty of things in the Shadowlands that maybe shouldn't have been there. Maybe those Covenant campaigns, maybe the Anima Drought lore, maybe that should have been massively condensed so that it could play along with the A-plot. And while that would mean that lots of world building and expansion of what the Warcraft mythos is, that would be sacrificed.
Yeah.
But what you earn with that sacrifice is a world where people understand Sylvanas. People understand the Jailer. They understand Bolvar. Bolvar gets something to do. Maybe Bolvar and his daughter get something to do, more than just once or twice in the expansion. Maybe Bane gets to do more than sit. And then when all these cinematics come around, people get to have a Varrock Sarfang-like experience where they actually are finding it to be deeply resonant. And sure, the Automa aren't as well fleshed out, and the Devourers are not there to set up 3 expansions in the future. But at least the story that we get is there and works.
Yeah.
And it gives people an emotional anchor. And I really think the thing that has damaged WoW the most is the severing of the emotional anchor. And that's been a combination of them butchering Warcraft 3. But like if they butchered it and did something really cool with it and actually executed this story, maybe more people could have swallowed that pill. But as it stands, they butchered it and then made a terrible story.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's lost in every capacity. And good Lord, if you're a night elf, it's even worse.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this basically every week for the past couple of months. I don't know how Night Elf and Tauren players haven't just deleted their characters and uninstalled the game. At least people who care about like the story of the character and stuff, because it's never going to be executed on. There's no feasible way they do it. They can't even deliver small class or small race quests to give you your armor. They can't do that. They've just put a pause on that project entirely without talking about it at all. We haven't had an allied race in expansions. Like, they clearly don't have the capacity to do anything.
Where's the Brawlers Guild? Where's our version of the Deaths of Chromie for this expansion?
Yeah, I guess they put a bunch of effort into making Zereth Mortis a little bit nicer than before, or nicer than Korthia was, which
maybe it's all 10-0.
Which is fair. Maybe it's all 10-0, but I am not willing to say that until I see it, because I don't know. I just don't. I don't really feel it. I'll see how I feel with 9.2.5, but I feel like, because the difference with Warlords into Legion was they had the team was big. World of Warcraft wasn't massively scuffed. It wasn't in the best of situations, but it was still, Warlords did bring, well, I mean, I suppose Shadowlands brought in a ton of money. But to be fair, I wasn't super following Blizzard at that time, so I don't know if there's staffing problems or team size issues there. But it seems
what basically happened is they tried to massively expand, and I've heard this from a few sources, and they did say the team expansion they said that publicly. The additional thing is that they kind of expanded the team too fast, and it was a challenge. Yeah. Which, in fairness to them, that is a big challenge.
Yeah,
expanding a team is very hard.
So I think maybe that's what is resulting in these problems now, but. Ultimately speaking, it feels like they had so much more time and so much more freedom to make a Legion happen because they just cut Warlords super, super hard. Whereas if they're arguing that they didn't do that for Shadowlands, that means 10.0 must be closer, which means they don't have that there. And the same with Warlords was they cut and ran. They haven't cut and ran quite as hard with this.
Ranor is free!
Yeah, well, they've done the same problem, or they've, to a lesser extent, I think, but all of the things they've put in 9.2 that mirror what happened in 8.2 and 8.3, which is we've designed new systems, we've designed a whole bunch of stuff, we've put a lot of effort into this patch to they're, instead of building a new boat, they're spending, all of the people who are good at building boats are instead throwing buckets of water out of the existing boat. That's kind of the problem. Because, the tier sets all needed designed, and most of them have been designed fairly well. Balance issues mostly ironed out a little bit. Sorry, Aflox and Red Paladins, but generally speaking, that's where a bunch of the effort is. A bunch of the effort has gone there, and Zereth Mortis is clearly a labor of love from a lot of designers. So I don't see how they could make that and 10.0 at the same time, if you follow. Whereas with Warlords, it was just, fuck it, come back when this game's good. They haven't done that.
Hard to know. I just think, if 10.0 is a more simple expansion, systems-wise, they're probably a lot more free to just make content. I just wonder... I mean, a really good example for us, before we truly got stuck into really building Pale Beyond, the version, you open up on Steam and play, we were 140,000 words we were getting here.
Yeah.
Into the game for the A plot. And that was, not having a lot of our events and a lot of those things that really do bulk out your word count being there. But then we obviously just knew, okay, now we need to stop this writing bit and we need to completely focus on the game, on the player experience. And we then, we go and we integrate that narrative and, things change a lot. Things do shift and change a lot once you're kind of so much more aware of how it's going to be experienced.
Yeah, for sure.
So, getting the systems simple, if that means they can almost have a, design lock on their systems earlier on in the development of the expansion, I think that would allow a lot more content creation to just fall into place.
Hopefully.
Because ultimately, look, Legion, big fucking mess.
Yeah.
Big mess that was full of awesome fantasy and loads of content.
Yep.
Which meant that even though loads of people were utterly furious about the state of legendaries, sometimes you're cool. The one because you get your first Lego faster. You'd be cool. The one Lego I got was a utility defensive one.
Guess I'll reroll my character.
Great,
that's faster.
Yeah, and the way artifact knowledge and all those weird things at the start. But still, it was yeah, but this bow's really cool. Yeah, look at this story I'm playing. Fucking right. This is what my class feels like.
Yeah.
It had the content and the fantasy, so if they can just get that systems lock a bit earlier with 10.0 and not have to... Because, if Covenants didn't have any of that player power attached, they would probably just been way more free to be okay, that's cool, what Covenant is, cool, it's just content, we'll go.
Yep.
Some people are saying the Noble has given up on WoW lore. Is that true?
No idea.
I
would certainly track based on
it's tricky.
Recently.
He's generally been more of a sort of a historian, a chronicler of the story, a teller of the tales. Yeah. He kind of codify the whole story of a character and present it to you. Cool, I want the word in Uther, now I have it. But I feel with the way the Blizzard have went in their story now, it's going to appeal, I think, a lot less to what Noble would enjoy, which is that. Categorize, chronicle, and then tell and make somebody really experience the story of a character. Whereas I think now they have, and I dearly hope that I played no part in this. I remember getting into speculation content. I mean, there was all speculation videos, but these kind of like, I'd almost call them speculation blockbusters, right? Where we go really hard. Like I remember one of our first ones was all the Rift of Allen and all of that stuff, where it was really starting to click at the start of Legion. And those videos started to do really well. And then all of a sudden I just noticed, whoa, there's loads more people are getting in this. This is really cool. And that was like a different style of kind of engaging with the lore to what I think Noble had tended to do. And it feels like Blizzard has went just further away from that older style of like the full story being in the game and being super clear. And they've went way more towards the, let's do a few hints that, me and Pyro can get 700 videos out of. It's like, that's how it feels the lore has changed. And, I really enjoy that. And it does mean that a new patch comes out and I'm like, oh, cool, we get to decode the things. I feel like Fareem sometimes. That's not for everyone. Apparently, Noble was very much not impressed with the new cutscene.
Wow.
Fair play.
I'm so surprised.
It's that thing with the new cutscene. It's what I say. I think the new cutscene, I don't know if these are what Blizzard's ideas are, but my reading the cutscene is there's actually loads of really good like character narrative and stuff. Like, the first thing Jaina does is ensure that Anduin is okay, thus showing progression in her character. But I would have liked to see them chew the fat on that a little bit more, given that Arthas was shown in Thros.
Yeah.
I would, and, the whole thing of Arthas has got, in a way, a bit of a shit deal because he doesn't even, get repentance. He doesn't even, we don't get to like... he gets such a bad deal, he doesn't even get to self-reflect. In a way, it's like, he doesn't even get to come to terms with what he did and therefore suffer, which is like the whole thing that Zoval was trying to do. It's like, it's that level of unjust. And that's all Uther's fault, because he was selfish. Now, that is my read when I sit down and try to mine as much out of the cinematic as I can.
Yeah.
That is not really what's in the cinematic.
No.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing where like, I mean, it's obviously the case where if you have themes there that you have, it's not even subtext, it is text, just is not very visible. It's just, if your audience don't experience it, then you've failed. I think that's the way I would put it. And I think that's effectively true of most of what they do. And that's a case of, in a world, I guess that's how execution of individual elements works. Like, if everything else lined up for this, if you're... I can't believe I'm about to use a sports analogy.
Whoa!
But if someone, if you're in football, if you're heading into the box and you have this incredible approach, perfect angle, no one's marking you, you're onside, you're in perfect position, you jump, make the perfect header, but the person who's going to pass from you from the other side of the box just fell over, then you didn't score the goal. You just headbutted the air for no reason. That's kind of what it feels like. Even in the best case, without any build-up, this is entirely pointless. Because you just have people having, well, I guess my headcanon is all this stuff worked. You're like, there's a point where that's okay and there's a point where it's not. Because it's not just pure black or white here in terms of, this is great, this is bad. There's various shades of grey in the middle.
Oh, just like the burning of Teldrassil.
Exactly.
That morally complex scene.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's all just, it feels so cheapened because they have to try and tell it really, really quickly. And you're like, you didn't earn any of this.
Yeah.
You didn't earn any of this. You have just shown me the final scene of a great, almost like showing someone, time for a fitting analogy, an anime analogy. It's like showing someone the fight between Goku and Frieza on Namek at the end without seeing any of the setup, without any of the reason. So you're like, well, I don't know why this guy's all that bad, and I don't know why this guy's hair turning blonde is really cool. That's I think a fairly fitting analogy of just, yeah, it represents all this stuff, but no one cares. So
yeah, it's like it represents, and I can find meaning in that.
Yeah.
But your movie, like, here's a great thing. Your movie should be good when someone watches your movie.
Yeah.
It shouldn't need a bunch of, thing explained YouTubers. That's where I go to say, maybe the worst of Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
As an example. It should work on first viewing. It's great if it's better in second viewing, but it should work in first viewing. Yeah. And I think with this, it's first viewing and then sit down and have a think about what it could mean.
Which is okay if
because they didn't have enough time to do it fully.
Yeah, that's okay if you're writing a deep philosophical story or something where you want to really, really impact viewers. But if you're going for, like I said a bit earlier, if you're going for, I don't want to say cheap because that sounds unfair, but if you're going for a relatively simple character narrative arc and you don't do that right, then you failed.
Yeah. So there we go. Anduin Cinematic.
Yeah.
I think it's about as good as it could have been. And honestly, I say that because I just don't trust them to have actually done anything that involved Arthas doing anything and have it feel good.
Yeah.
I think it would have been worse.
Yeah, the reason, I think I said earlier, the reason I hate this cinematic so much isn't because of the cinematic, it's because what it represents, what it could have been. Because I see Arthas, I hear Arthas' name mentioned, I go, oh yeah, this expansion could have been so much more enjoyable to me as a player, and to, I imagine, players in the same mindset, if they'd focused on Arthas, if they'd focused on Anduin and the Arthas parallels instead of having it all written down in a notebook somewhere and never showing any of us, but only showing us every 30th line. Because I'm even imagining, even simple stuff like if Anduin on his way to attack Carestia, or, well, that wouldn't work logically, but on the way to Haven in Zereth Mortis, they really focused on this massive dead scar left behind. And then Sylvanas sees it and has an emotional reaction because it's the dead scar. It's the thing when the Sunwell was destroyed. It was this horrible, horrible event, or Sunwell was used, rather. And it's just, all that stuff was there. Could have been done, but it wasn't.